Jung never spoke of a higher power in a simplistic or religious sense. For him, protection did not come from outside forces intervening magically, but from the deeper intelligence of the psyche itself. What many people call a higher power, Jung understood as the self. The self is not the ego. It is the organizing center of the entire psyche. It guides development, balance, and meaning, often in ways the conscious mind does not immediately understand. Protection, then, does not always feel like comfort. Sometimes it feels like disruption. One of the first signs that a deeper intelligence is at work is when things fall apart at moments you least expect. Plans collapse. Relationships end abruptly. Opportunities disappear without explanation. At the ego level, this feels like loss or punishment. But from a deeper perspective, it is often redirection. Jung observed that when the ego moves too far away from the path of individuation, the psyche intervenes, not gently, but decisively. What feels like misfortune may actually be the psyche preventing you from becoming trapped in a life that does not belong to you. Another sign appears through repetition. You encounter the same obstacle again and again, the same type of person, the same emotional lesson. This repetition is not bad luck. It is insistence. The unconscious repeats what has not been integrated. It places the lesson in front of you until it is seen consciously. From the outside, this looks like fate. From the inside, it is protection. Because without repetition, growth would be postponed indefinitely. Jung famously wrote, "What we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate." Protection, in this sense, is not about avoiding pain. It is about ensuring awareness. A third sign appears in moments of intuition. Sudden inner resistance. A quiet feeling of no, even when logic says yes. These moments are easy to ignore. But Jung believed intuition is one of the most direct expressions of the self. It speaks softly. It does not argue. When intuition interrupts desire, it is often because desire is driven by the ego, while intuition serves the whole psyche. Many people look back on their lives and realize that the moments they ignored intuition were the moments that led to the deepest suffering, and the moments they listened, even when it made no sense, quietly saved them. Another sign of protection is delayed gratification. You want something badly. You work toward it, but it does not arrive. At least, not when you expect it to. Jung believed that timing is essential to psychological development. The psyche unfolds in stages. Receiving something too early can be just as damaging as never receiving it at all. What feels like denial may actually be preparation. The psyche strengthens itself before allowing certain experiences. This kind of protection is subtle. It does not announce itself. It simply withholds until readiness is present. And finally, there is the sign most people misunderstand: loneliness. Periods of isolation. Feeling misunderstood. Feeling out of sync with the world. Jung experienced this deeply in his own life. He saw loneliness not as abandonment, but as withdrawal of projections. When outer attachments fall away, the psyche turns inward. This inward turn is not a punishment. It is an initiation. The higher power, in Jung's view, does not protect you by surrounding you with people and noise. It protects you by giving you space to encounter your own depths. And this encounter, while uncomfortable, is where meaning is born. Jung understood that protection is often misunderstood because it does not align with the ego's idea of safety. The ego wants certainty, predictability, control, but the psyche is oriented toward wholeness, not comfort. This is why protection often arrives in forms that initially feel destabilizing. Another subtle sign appears when your external life slows down against your will. Momentum disappears. Motivation weakens. The usual drives lose their force. Many people interpret this as laziness or failure. Jung saw it differently. He believed that when outward striving becomes excessive, the psyche pulls energy back inward. This withdrawal is not collapse. It is rebalancing. The unconscious redirects libido away from achievement and toward reflection. In these periods, nothing seems to move forward, yet something essential is happening beneath the surface. Old values dissolve. Outdated goals lose meaning. New orientations quietly begin to form. This pause protects the psyche from building a life on foundations that no longer correspond to the inner truth. Another sign emerges through unexpected help. Not dramatic rescues, but timely interventions. A conversation that changes perspective. A book that appears at the right moment. A chance encounter that redirects attention. Jung called these experiences synchronicities. They are not coincidences in the causal sense, but meaningful alignments between inner state and outer event. Synchronicity does not force action. It invites reflection. It signals that the psyche and the world are momentarily aligned. This alignment often appears when a person is at a psychological crossroads. It does not remove responsibility. It sharpens it. Another form of protection appears when paths close decisively, doors shut without explanation, opportunities vanish, relationships end without resolution. The ego experiences this as rejection. The psyche experiences it as boundary. Jung believed that boundaries imposed by fate often serve individuation. They prevent diffusion. They concentrate energy. When too many possibilities remain open, development stagnates. Closure, even when painful, creates direction. It forces the psyche to engage with what remains. There is also protection in recurring inner images, dreams that repeat certain symbols, images of descent, water, darkness, or travel. Jung saw dreams as communications from the self. When dreams intensify, it often signals that conscious life is not listening. The psyche compensates. It sends images to restore balance. Protection, here, is not prevention. It is guidance. Guidance toward what has been ignored. And finally, there is protection in emotional resistance. A sense of unease around certain people, places, or choices, even when nothing is outwardly wrong. This resistance is often dismissed as anxiety or overthinking. Jung believed it was frequently instinct. Instinct precedes logic. It perceives patterns before the conscious mind can name them. Ignoring this resistance repeatedly often leads to exhaustion or breakdown. Listening to it conserves psychic energy, and conservation of energy is a form of protection. Taken together, these signs suggest something important. Protection is not a shield that keeps life from touching you. It is an intelligence that ensures life touches you. Where growth is possible, it allows pain, but not meaninglessness. It allows loss, but not fragmentation. And it intervenes, not to save the ego, but to preserve the integrity of the self. One of the most difficult aspects of recognizing protection is that it often works in reverse. Instead of adding something to your life, it removes something, a belief, a role, an identity you have outgrown. Jung believed that the psyche evolves through subtraction as much as through acquisition. What no longer serves wholeness is slowly dismantled. This dismantling can feel like loss of direction. You no longer recognize yourself in old ambitions. The future that once motivated you no longer feels alive. This is not confusion. It is transition. The psyche is withdrawing energy from forms that have completed their function. Another sign appears when emotional reactions begin to change. Situations that once triggered anxiety now evoke neutrality. Conflicts that once consumed you no longer pull you in. This emotional flattening is often misinterpreted as detachment or numbness. Jung saw it as integration. When unconscious material becomes conscious, it loses its charge. Protection here takes the form of emotional economy. The psyche no longer wastes energy on outdated battles. There is also protection in the collapse of false certainty. Beliefs you once held with confidence begin to feel fragile. Questions arise where answers once stood. This can feel destabilizing, especially for those who equate certainty with safety. But Jung believed that false certainty is one of the greatest threats to psychological development. Doubt opens the door to humility. Humility opens the door to learning. In this way, uncertainty protects the psyche from rigidity. Another subtle sign of protection is the emergence of inner dialogue. You begin to question your own motives. You notice contradictions. You become curious about your reactions. This reflective capacity is not self-doubt. It is self-observation. Jung considered self-observation a sign that the ego is no longer dominant. It has entered a relationship with the unconscious. This relationship allows correction before collapse. Protection, then, is not something that happens to you. It is something that grows within you. As this inner dialogue deepens, external validation loses importance. You become less reactive to praise and criticism. Your sense of direction no longer depends on approval. This autonomy is fragile at first, but it is real. Jung believed that autonomy is one of the primary goals of individuation. A psyche that depends entirely on external affirmation is easily destabilized. Protection lies in inner reference. Another form of protection appears through fatigue, a deep tiredness that sleep does not cure. This is often pathologized. Jung understood it as a signal that the psyche has been living against its own rhythm. Fatigue forces re-evaluation. It slows you down. When willpower refuses to, it protects the psyche from long-term depletion. And finally, there is protection in being misunderstood. Periods where you feel unseen, out of place, unable to explain yourself. Jung experienced this personally. During his break with Freud, he saw misunderstanding as a crucible. When external mirrors fail, the psyche turns inward. Identity becomes less performative, more essential. This inward turn strengthens the connection to the self. And this connection, though quiet, is the deepest form of protection there is, because what protects is not an external force that controls events, but an internal intelligence that guides life towards wholeness. As this inner intelligence becomes more perceptible, a subtle recalibration takes place in how meaning is experienced. Events no longer feel random in the same way, not because everything seems planned, but because everything feels connected to an inner movement. Jung warned against interpreting this connection as superstition or grand destiny. The psyche does not arrange events to make life easier. It arranges experiences to make life conscious. Protection, therefore, is often retrospective. Only later does a person realize that what once felt like delay was preservation, that what felt like rejection was redirection, that what felt like collapse prevented a deeper fragmentation. This is why trust develops slowly. Not blind trust, but experiential trust. Trust formed by surviving what once seemed unbearable. Another sign that this protective process is active is the growing ability to endure ambiguity. You no longer rush to label experiences as good or bad. You allow them to unfold. Jung believed that polarity, the need to divide life into opposites, belongs to an early stage of consciousness. Mature consciousness tolerates paradox. It understands that growth often wears the mask of loss, and protection often arrives as discomfort. This tolerance does not mean passivity. It means engagement without panic, action without compulsion. As this capacity grows, Decisions begin to arise from a quieter place. Less urgency, less justification. You act because something feels aligned, not because you are running from fear. This alignment is bodily as much as mental. The body relaxes around certain choices. It contracts around others. Jung saw the body as a carrier of unconscious wisdom. Ignoring it repeatedly leads to symptoms. Listening to it is another form of protection. Symptoms themselves are not enemies. They are communications. Anxiety, exhaustion, restlessness. These are signals that something essential is being overlooked. When listened to early, they guide. When ignored, they force. Protection prefers guidance, but it will escalate if necessary. Another shift appears in how failure is perceived. Failure loses its finality. It becomes feedback, not personal judgment, but information. This reframing protects the psyche from identification with outcome. Jung believed that identification with success or failure binds the ego too tightly to external measures. Detachment here does not mean indifference. It means flexibility. Flexibility allows correction, and correction prevents collapse. As these patterns continue to unfold, life begins to feel less like a series of accidents, and more like a dialogue. Not a dialogue with a voice, but with experience itself. Each situation asks a question. Each response shapes the next. Protection is woven into this dialogue. It does not remove difficulty. It ensures relevance. And relevance is what keeps the psyche alive, oriented, and capable of growth. This process does not rush. It unfolds at the pace the psyche can sustain. Sometimes slowly, sometimes abruptly, but always toward greater coherence. Not perfection, not certainty, coherence. And this coherence continues to develop, quietly organizing life from within, as long as attention remains present, and listening remains possible. As coherence deepens, the sense of being guided no longer feels mystical. It feels practical. You begin to notice that certain choices consistently drain you, while others, even when difficult, sustain you. Jung would say this is the psyche revealing its orientation. Protection shows itself not by eliminating struggle, but by clarifying direction. This clarity does not come with certainty about outcomes. It comes with confidence about alignment. You may not know what will happen, but you know when something is wrong. This knowing is subtle. It does not shout. It appears as hesitation before a decision, a heaviness when moving in one direction, a quiet relief when moving in another. Ignoring these signals repeatedly often leads to exhaustion or inner conflict. Listening to them conserves psychic energy, and energy, in Jung's psychology, is life itself. Another sign that this protective intelligence is active is a change in how time is experienced. Urgency fades. The constant pressure to arrive somewhere begins to loosen. Life feels less like a race, and more like a process. Jung believed that impatience is often a defense against inner listening. When we rush, we do not have to feel. When the pace slows against our will, it is often because something needs attention. Protection slows life down. When the psyche needs space, there is also protection in being redirected repeatedly, away from what once seemed certain. Careers shift. Values rearrange. Priorities invert. This can feel destabilizing, especially for those who equate stability with consistency. Jung saw true stability as fidelity to inner truth, not to external structure. Structures must change. When the psyche changes, clinging to outdated forms creates conflict. Letting them evolve preserves wholeness. Another subtle shift occurs in how success is defined. Success becomes less about accumulation and more about congruence. Not how much have I achieved, but how honestly am I living? This question protects the psyche from sacrificing itself to ideals that do not belong to it. As this redefinition takes place, comparisons lose power. You no longer measure your life against others' timelines. Jung believed comparison is a sign that the ego has lost contact with its own path. Reconnection dissolves comparison naturally. And when comparison fades, envy and resentment weaken. These emotions consume energy. Their reduction is another form of protection. There is also protection in the growing capacity to be alone without feeling abandoned. Solitude no longer feels like absence. It feels like presence without demand. Jung considered this a milestone. A person who can be alone is no longer dependent on others to regulate their inner state. This independence is not isolation. It is stability, and stability allows for genuine connection. As these changes accumulate, life begins to feel less reactive. Events still happen. Loss still occurs. Challenges remain. But the psyche is no longer fragmented by them. There is a sense of continuity beneath the fluctuations. This continuity is what Jung meant by relationship to the self. And it is this relationship that quietly protects, not by controlling fate, but by preserving meaning through every turn. And this process continues, unfolding with its own rhythm, as long as attention remains inwardly anchored and outwardly responsive. And this is why, from a Jungian perspective, the idea of a higher power protecting you is not something mystical or distant. It is something intimate. It is the self quietly working to preserve your wholeness when the ego does not yet know how. Protection does not mean that nothing painful will happen to you. It means that nothing meaningless will. What appears as delay, redirection, loss, or inner resistance is often life preventing you from becoming trapped in a version of yourself that is too small. Jung believed that the greatest danger is not suffering, but unconsciousness, and what protects you most deeply is whatever brings you closer to awareness, closer to truth, closer to integration, closer to who you are meant to become. When you begin to see life this way, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" And you begin to ask, "What is this shaping me into?" That question changes everything. If this perspective resonated with you, if it gave language to experiences you have felt but never fully understood, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here we explore Carl Jung's psychology, the deeper intelligence of the psyche, and the hidden processes that guide transformation, meaning, and inner growth. Subscribe, and continue this journey toward consciousness, wholeness, and a deeper relationship with yourself.